Hello, this is my presentation on the national space effort that John F. Kennedy, our 31st former president, gave in 1961 at Rice University in Houston, Texas. This right here is a representation of space exploration. This is my rocket that I used to play with as a kid, and I loved every second of it. I thought space was so cool, and astronauts and the stars and planets, everything that kind of correlates with that. So I thought this kind of represents perfectly what I'm talking about currently. So what I want to talk, I actually have a question to you guys about, is how many of you have ever thought that there is life outside of our Earth, in our solar system, or even in our galaxy, or in our universe, anywhere? There's so many different universes in this whole entire, I don't know, whatever we want to call it. But how many of you have ever thought that? I personally have thought this. This is a big question. I've always wondered, like, is there more out there? I mean, we don't really know, unless, of course, maybe Area 51 knows, but that doesn't correlate to anything I'm talking about. Okay, so with that being said, John F. Kennedy gave this speech, 19-minute speech in Houston, Texas, to the students at Rice University. First thing I want to speak about is well, what he talked about, okay? And in a brief explanation, what he talked about. Secondly, I would love to talk about how Kennedy how he kind of positively and promoted his speech on space exploration to our community in Houston, Texas, as well as the students at Rice University. Lastly, I plan to talk about how Kennedy's speech connects to our current space programs and explorations, i.e., or like Mars. Let's say Mars, because that's where we're kind of headed towards. Okay, so with that being said, John F. Kennedy, he was kind of targeting the audience of, well, Rice University students. So students like me right now in their 20s, they're exploring what they're doing, everything like that. That was the major push for space exploration. If you can get the kids going through it, they can do all their riots, they can do all their whatevers, and they can get this push going, okay? As well as the community of Houston came around too as well, and those are kind of the older generation a little bit more, and they have an impact in society as well, just as much as the kids in their 20s or so. And lastly, it was broadcasted on live television as well, which is huge during the 60s because that was kind of the new invention. So that was targeted towards live television in the national kind of U.S. Television broadcasting series. I'm not sure how to kind of phrase that, but that's how that is right there. Okay, so that being said, conflict-wise during space exploration, an aspect that we struggle with that Kenny kind of stated is that he is not saying that we should go to space unprotected because of the hostile environment in space. But, however, he does not also say that we should also go to war unprotected because of the hostile land use that goes on during war, right? So there is no strife or prejudice or national conflict in land or space, I mean, not in land, but in space. So that is something that we can easily overcome, and something that we already overcome in land, but if it occurs in space, we can also do that too. But, we choose to go to the moon because it is not easy, but because it is hard, right? War is hard. Going to space is very hard. That's what he really wants you to kind of connect with, okay? Something that like I said, I really enjoyed that quote. That's something I can connect with very well. So Kennedy stated by the end of his kind of his speech that end of the 60s we would have reached the moon, no matter what. Okay, no matter what, no other circumstances. He did just that, but through hard work and dedication, he conquered reaching the moon. Not by him, but also all these different people, scientists, engineers, astronauts, I don't know, chemical, physical, I don't know, biological, whatever. So he gave this speech in 1961. Okay, John F. Kennedy gave that speech, 1961. We landed on the moon with walking men, 1969. 8 years later. He said by the end of the 60s. That was like on the dot, 8 years later. But yes, through the knit and grit, we finally made it to the moon. And that is berserk, I think, which is insane. Like the different things we had to do and trials and different things. It's insane. Okay, so this is why we're talking about this right now. So how does this kind of correlate to today's day and age of space exploration? So today's day and age exploration, we're constantly inventing things and doing bigger and better inventions, right? So one thing that NASA, I've kind of found in a study that I did for this project right here, NASA stated that we have one big project right now. It's called Project Artemis. Project Artemis is a project that we are doing to get to Mars. I'm not sure what project it is called for Moon, but Project Artemis is for Mars. So we are constantly developing, adapting, and doing different adaptations to get to the moon as fast as possible, just like we were doing in the 60s to get to the moon, right? But we're doing it at a bigger, faster rate. So you have to, we are not doing this because it is easy, but because it is hard. Naturally, we must have to fuel these rockets. We have to pay for these hard laborers that are constantly working hours and hours away from their family. We have to pay these guys as well. Okay, so Kennedy stated that $5 billion a year is what it would take to get to the moon. Okay, he stated that it is a lot of money, okay? In the 60s, that's even more than it is now, okay? But conveniently, it is less than what we pay to make cigars and cigarettes each year in the 60s. Isn't that convenient? We pay more money than $5 billion in the 60s for cigars and cigarettes. Okay, so I was like, okay, I'm curious about this. I want to understand what it's like currently. So I looked on the CDC. The CDC stated that currently in the United States, we spend over $300 billion a year alone on cigarettes. I don't know about the cigars, but $300 billion a year on cigarettes. So I was like, okay, I'm curious about how much it is now to make us get to NASA. So, not to NASA, but to Mars. So I looked on NASA and I was like, okay, well, NASA stated that getting one human to Mars would take about $100 to $500 billion alone. Just one astronaut. Okay, so if we implemented the money that we use, $300 billion each year into cigarettes, and we implement that into our space program, could you imagine how big the outcomes we can get out of that? We can get to Mars as fast as we can. You know, with the money, the right amount of money, the research we can do, we can implement anything. It's crazy how much money we spend on just cigarettes alone each year. We can get better things for our space exploration program. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. There has not really been a difference between 1960 and 2024, 22nd century. Okay, 80-year difference. It's about the same. You know, you can tell what we kind of use our materials for mostly. Right? Who doesn't want to go? You know, we want to smoke a cigarette more than we want to go to Mars. I don't know, it's kind of interesting to me. So. The effects that this speech has had on me not only has targeted the people at Rice University and the community in Houston, but also me terrifically. I would have never really researched this if I did not have this assignment. And I thought it was very interesting, gained a lot of knowledge after it. Not only that, but thousands of people were impacted, scientists, engineers, astronauts were impacted by this speech, let alone let them become engineers and scientists later on. They were kids watching this. They finally were like, I want to do that for NASA. I want to work for this. I want to be this big person and do this for our country as alone as humankind, okay? So long-term wise, he didn't even know he was doing it. Kenny didn't even have that thing. He was just trying to be the president. He was trying to promote and build up people for space exploration, okay? Long-term wise, he did great. He didn't even know anything about it. Just in a 19-minute speech at a large university in the middle of Texas. No idea. He long-term wise created a whole bunch of different astronauts. Kind of cool. So President John F. Kennedy's speech at Rice University had a long-lasting effects on citizens of America during the 60s, not only promoting space exploration, but also describing in detail how Kennedy planned on using space exploration. Secondly, Kennedy uplifted our country through positivity and through positive affirmations and powerful quotes that fueled America to get to the moon through our space exploration program. Okay. Lastly, our speech, the same speech that Kennedy gave in 1961, 80 years later, still identifies itself in today's day and age. But we are working to get to Mars every single day. Concluding, as President Kennedy stated, we choose to go to the moon and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. We do the same goes for the mission to go to Mars. We know that it is not easy, but it is hard, and that is why we do what we do in the mission of space exploration. This quote not only goes for space exploration, but also I feel like it can be implemented into so many different things and aspects of life. And that is something I feel like I've learned from this quote, maybe not this quote, but this project, is we can do hard things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard. Thank you.